thank you for taking the time to download and listen to this podcast from Celtic Underground. You are possibly picking this up on theceltigunderground.substack.com. If you are a paid subscriber, you can link your account to wherever you pick up your podcasts, whether that be Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever, and you can pick up the subscription feed where you get your normal feed. Just go on to Substack on the website and follow the instructions. Meantime, this is Andrew H. Smith in conversation.
Hi and welcome to Celtic Underground in Conversation series, which, in a change to our published schedule, is coming to you midweek. And the reason for that is we just had to cover an incredibly important and incredibly vexing topic. And there is no better person to do that, take us pick through that with, than Jill Thomson of Scottish Sport for Palestine. Jill, it's terrific to have you on.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's an honour to be on I think you said it was the longest running football fan podcast in the world. So thank you very much for having me on here.
Yeah, and your fiver will be coming later on because you know what I mean. For that
Brilliant.
gratuitous mention,
I'll
we love these gratuitous mentions of that stat. But
it's a good stat, to be fair.
It's a very good stat. It's Brian's told me that stat many a time.
The pressure's to keep it up, though.
Oh God, aye. We're doing our best, and that's why we're delighted to have. We're really trying to engage with all sorts of different people from different fields, and well, politics is very important to the Celtic support, and the Palestinian situation is very important to the Celtic support, which is why we're kind of giving ourselves away here, like why we have you on tonight, tomorrow, whenever you're watching this. But this is to do with, we all know, the attempts of the club to sign Jocelyn Tabby, an Ivory Coast winger, which it seems to have actually been scuppered now by the fact that he's got he seems to have needs surgery on a knee issue. But I don't know if you want to take it up. I mean, Palestinian sport for Scottish sport for Palestine has been very. It's championed the Celtic support because, especially through the Green Brigade, and really, the Green Brigade deserve enormous plaudits for their unstinting and incredibly long-held solidarity with the Palestinian people. And you've recognised that in your campaigning group. But this week, you've had to turn your guns, if you like. You've had to cry shame over this self-same club. Do you want to take up why? I mean, I think most people will know why, but just from your own point of view or the way you've articulated it on your public pronouncements, why is this such a vexing issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously like a crying shame that a club that was kind of, founded out of or by survivors of genocide is kind of towing the Zionist line. I think we've seen it for quite a long time with Celtic, and it's maybe not been so obvious for many outsiders, but I think people that, really follow the club will have noticed that, while the fans, as you mentioned, do so many positive actions and really champion Palestinian rights on the terraces week in, week out, there's kind of a policy of complete silence from the boards publicly and, behind closed doors. It seems that there's perhaps a lot of other things going on. So I think, in terms of this deal, it just seems outrageous that, Celtic would even consider giving £2 million to an Israeli club. When so many Celtic supporters as well, practice BDS day in, day out. I believe you've mentioned previously it's something that, you really try to follow, obviously
Yes.
referring to boycott, divest, sanctions. And I think, there are many people that do that, when they go shopping, they'll avoid buying certain brands so that they don't pay into companies which are complicit in Israeli apartheid and genocide. And it's an insult really to those fans if their football club is then kind of in some ways undoing all of their like good efforts day in day out by giving so much money to a football club potentially
Yeah.
in a transfer fee.
And in this situation, it's particularly noxious. And we should say this is nothing against the player himself. This is all to do with the deal and all to do with who you're dealing with. It's particularly noxious in this instance because his parent club is Maccabi Netanya, sorry, which is owned by Ally Capital Partners, which has invested 30 million in an Israeli drone company called Extend, which military drones are part of this. So the direct link with the genocide could not be clearer, could it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you mentioned, there's just so much complicity there, from that club alone. And I think um, somebody sent me also evidence going back to, I believe it was kind of October, November 2023, where the club was posting like really pro-genocidal messages saying we will win, with that caption over loads of pictures of war machines, tanks, also asking people, supporters of the club, to kind of like upload photos. I mean, we see this kind of thing with a lot of Israeli clubs.
Hmm.
And it's one of the reasons, one of the arguments as to really why they should be banned or sanctioned at the very least by UEFA and FIFA, because they're using football as a channel in which to promote war. But I mean, going back to the deal, as you mentioned, I mean, huge complicity there. The links could not be starker. And I think at the very least, you would expect the Celtic board to come out with a statement if this had been such, just a rumor from the start, to kind of say, no, we would not be spending money on a player that is in an Israeli club. And they obviously didn't do that. And then I think the news kind of emerged that actually this was a transfer that seemed to be going through. And then, as you've mentioned, it seems to have at the very last minute, even after some news sources reported it was a done deal, it seems to have hit this potentially convenient snag. Whether that's true or not, that he needs some surgery, I guess we're probably not going to discuss that. But
Yeah, we don't
yeah,
know. I
it's
suppose we
interesting
don't know.
timing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but this is for us that, well, we're suffering Celtic supporters right now. That the Celtic board seem to be a can't do right for doing wrong, but they seem to have even, they've topped themselves with this kind of tin-eared approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it just seems to be a PR disaster. It just seems to be one thing after another after another. And really, like, it's fuel for any campaign against the board. And you would think that the people sitting on that board would be doing all they can,
Mm.
to kind of communicate things with supporters. And it doesn't really seem like that's happening. And I think that's in some ways, um, well, in some ways, it's arguably facilitated, calls by fans to actually stop this deal, because if the board is silent on it and if the papers are reporting that the deal's going ahead, like quite rightfully, fans are going to organize themselves and argue that this cannot go ahead. It's a stain really on the club. Celtic has bought a lot of Israeli or Israeli linked players before. I think it's signed the most players in Scotland. And that's something that I think would be like a stat that might shock quite a lot of people who didn't like closely follow Scottish football. Um, but again, that just highlights like the complete disconnect between the fans and what they stand for and what the board stands for.
Yep.
So, and
Yeah.
what a time really to be investing in an Israeli team if they were to, of all the times to do it, why would you do it in 2026?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and this Israeli team, I was reading just earlier on there, Netanya, they're actually considered the third most racist team in terms of their chanting from the terraces after, was it Maccabi Haifa. I can't remember the other team, but some of the instances of what they have been chanting, and we've seen from everything that happened down in Birmingham, whatever. So they're very much cut from that mold. So
Yeah,
it just layers it on top of one another about how, as I say, how extraordinarily like tin-eared that this move is, and it actually highlights perhaps like how this board really have lost their way in every way, shape or form. As you say, if they had anything about them, they would not just think this was a bad deal. Plenty of Celtic supporters would say, why don't they just think about anything and everything? But
exactly.
you mentioned, and there was also it was almost a double whammy because there was also the follow up about Mohamed Bamba, the striker from Lorient, who just happens to be represented by our old friend, like because we know about the number of deals, Duda Dahan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I posted about him earlier this year. I think some Celtic supporters kind of sort of drew my attention to him. And yeah, it's interesting how many Israeli players he's actually been linked to with regards to transfers to Celtic. I mean, these stats I think are maybe slightly outdated because they're from 2025. But yeah, I mean, 100% of the managers he represented in 2025 were Israeli, and 78% of the players were Israeli. And there were a number of other players who weren't Israeli. I think a couple of Ivorian players, which obviously this latest one's also been linked to the club. And they actually play, many of them, in this case not, but many of them also played at Israeli clubs. So yeah, I mean, it's quite staggering that the club is still doing deals with him, especially because, he said, I believe in 2023, he dropped one of his players who was a Palestinian. He was a former under-21 captain for the Israeli team, and he switched allegiance. He received death threats from the IOF. The Israeli minister threatened to revoke his citizenship. His name was Atta Jaber, and in response to that, instead of standing by him, Dudu Dahan actually said, Scout Push is his agency. He said, Scout Push no longer represents him. We will not tolerate any support of Gaza. We will sever ties with any player of ours who does so. And that was reported in the New Arab in November 2023. So the timing's also kind of important because I think this was just post October 2023 when he made the decision. So, I mean, how an agent can come out with a statement like that, which is, you know, completely, I think, just horrific, uh, and then still expect to work with a club which has a mission statement to, you know, to disassociate the club with racism, bigotry, sectarianism of any kind, and promotes Celtic as a club for all. I find that like quite troubling.
Yeah,
Um,
it makes a mockery of it, doesn't it? It
yeah,
makes a mockery
definitely.
of it. And the very fact with the wording that you gave us there, it was Gaza. It
Mhm.
wasn't Hamas or anything. It was
Exactly.
an actual. It was an area that's been an open prison for the best part of 20 years because of the blockade, the Israeli
Exactly.
blockade, and as I say, Celtic and full marks to them. The Green Brigade. This isn't. They're not Johnny Come Latelys on this. Like it's nearly 10 years since the first time they were sanctioned by the club, or sanctioned by UEFA for them just showing support for the Palestinian people.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean UEFA, I don't know if it's still quite the case, but I know that they used to sort of consider Palestinian flags to be, I think, what they called quote unquote illicit banners. So that just shows you, the kind of racist Zionist policies that UEFA push onto clubs. And I say that, I'm sure there are people in clubs who disagree with those policies, but I think that there's also, there are probably many directors at clubs who happily, try to ensure that their fans abide by those policies. And yeah, as you mentioned, they've been fined for many years, but even before that, I mean, I think you could go back. I think Celtic fans have been flying the Palestinian flag, in Celtic Park for about 30 years, I believe. So
Yeah,
it's
because there was a thing in Ireland, because obviously the demarcation lines, the kind of culture wars almost started in Ireland before anywhere else, in the sense that because the unionist population used to fly, well, obviously the nationalist population flew. They've always been close to the Palestinians. I mean, a lot of the PLO camps and all that trained like the Irish freedom fighters in the 90s or whatever, and apparently they were one of the biggest suppliers of arms to look at, because oppressed people come together. You just need to hear Nelson Mandela when he talks, and he's talking 30 years ago as well, about what none of us are free until the Palestinians are free, I think was one of his statements. So it's naturally that oppressed people, colonized people, find their friends and similarly colonized and oppressed people, don't they?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and I think it's interesting. I think, like you mentioned, when you look at Celtic, obviously you have many supporters, from the Irish or who form part of the Irish diaspora, and that's like within Scotland, but also worldwide. And I think this is something that's really interesting, because I think if you go abroad or if you spend any time abroad, the image of the club abroad is very much one, I think, of supporters that do like really brilliant anti-racism work,
Mm.
anti-fascism work, that stand for Palestinian rights, and I'm sure many other causes. And I think like their charitable work and their kind of stance on these issues is like very well recognized. And, you can go to pro-Palestinian demonstrations and you'll see people even in other countries wearing, Celtic strips.
Mm.
And I'm not convinced, with no disrespect to the club, that it's totally because of the results that they have in European football. So, but the board will be aware of this. They will, I'm sure, know that, part of their image is being this pro-Palestinian club. And I'm sure they're aware that there are many supporters, whom they punish, who are actually doing some like brilliant PR work for them.
Mm.
Not that that's the reason, obviously, that anybody would do that work, but I think if anything, it would be, they'd be mortified if they thought that that was giving the board or putting money into the pockets of the board. But I mean, I'm sure it will result in, merchandise sales going up. And I mean, I did a bit of research looking into this and looking into like how Celtic's broken into, like top 20 clubs, I think, in Europe for merchandise sales and these kinds of things. And, a lot of it does kind of align with pro-Palestinian actions. A lot of it has been within the last 2 years. I'm sure there might be other factors as well. I would imagine the club has access to like much more like data than I found, but I don't think that it harms them, to
No,
have
no,
pro-Palestinian actions. And I think really the UEFA fines are a drop in the ocean for a club like Celtic. They're not huge fines, and they've not been fined for a while.
no. And you know that the Green Brigade raised was it 100 and there was it was 160,000 or something
Yeah, something like that.
from the fine, which I think they gave to Palestinian causes, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah. I believe. I think I'm not sure if it was split between medical aid for Palestinians and the Laji Centre.
I think it might be.
But out of that, yeah, they funded Laji Celtic. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not sure the exact split, but yeah, I believe they gave it to both.
yeah. And Roger Waters has never had a backdrop of a football support other than the Celtic support that he had
Yeah,
when they had all the Palestinian flags.
yeah,
My boy been among those, holding them up like
yeah.
proudly, like he still had
Brilliant.
it on his wall. I think up to recently,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it fell down. By the way, it wasn't it? He took it down, but you know how blue tack dries in just before anybody's thinking, saying, "What has he changed his
Amazing.
minds?" Like, no, blue tack dries in sometimes, and your things come off the wall. You know what it's like. Like you
Yeah,
always
yeah.
forget to put them back up. But I mean, there's always been this disconnect. People, it's a complex. Celtics is a complex history,
Yeah.
like because the founding fathers, one of the founding fathers of the club, there was always the Irish identity, and there was always the kind of there was the Free Staters, and there was but there were more home rule than Free Staters even at that time. But there was even one of the founding fathers, like he gave money to the British Army when they were fighting the Boer War. I mean, the rest of the
Mm.
board were kind of renouncing him for that, but we still stayed part of that board, and they lost their kind of charitable aims within 10 years, and they said the club had to be professionalised and they had to become a private limited company in order to keep up with the changing landscape in football. But what happened was the charitable donations just dropped off a cliff. Then we started seeing some of the biggest dividends that directors in any football club in Britain were receiving were received by those same guys. That's what happens sometimes, doesn't it? Noble projects sometimes take a right turn in more
Yeah,
ways than one.
that's interesting. I didn't actually know that. I mean, I knew obviously like a bit of the history, and I've been looking into a little bit about that, but of how the club was founded. But I didn't realize that all happened, like so, like within the first decade or so. So yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Brother Walfred, who it was his vision. Like he got posted to London, and obviously by the time he got posted to London, I think it was about 4 years after the club started, and then there was all these murmurings about, oh no, we need to become a private limited company. We can't keep just making money for these uh, penny tables. They were called children's dinner tables, penny tables, and that's what happens. I suppose money's the root of all evil, as they say. Look, and again, you wonder what's happened. I mean, is there any clubs you aware of that at the executive level that they show real support for the Palestinian cause, or is it always at grassroots level?
It's a good question. I mean, I think Atletico Bilbao has come out with a statement in support of Palestine. I believe they said that they stood with Palestinians. I'm not sure the exact wording of it, but I think, that was quite a big moment. And I think it's interesting, that they're based in the Basque Country
Last country,
because, you do have pockets of the world where, like you mentioned before, you have people who have, a history of oppression, who will align themselves, with other people elsewhere in the world who have gone through similar things. So there's no surprises there that a lot of the support, I think, within Spain is in the Basque Country. Although Spain in general, I think, is like pretty pro-Palestinian. There's been a lot of support there, but also, as you mentioned, you've got Ireland, very,
yeah.
very pro-Palestinian. Obviously, Scotland and many of the Irish diaspora living in Glasgow as well, very pro-Palestinian. So, yeah, I mean, I think in terms of support from clubs, I do think, as you mentioned, like money really does corrupt things. A lot of the
Mm.
support is at grassroots level, and I think that's something which I've tried to do a little bit. In my organization is try to kind of tease apart this kind of idea that Celtic Football Club as a whole is pro-Palestinian, because I think the problem with that is that when obviously in this day and age, like on social media, people will, without thinking, just tag a football club like Celtic and say, "Oh, Celtic FC always on the right side of history."
Aye.
When they see a video of Celtic fans, waving the Palestinian flags. And the problem with that is, like, it's the fans that are doing that, but it's
Mm.
the club that then benefits.
Reflected glory, yeah, that comes to the
Exactly.
club.
And I think like I think it's a difficult thing to do, because you do want to recognize that, what the fans are doing is brilliant, but at the same time, the board is just is has been terrible on this. They've got a policy of non-engagement. They haven't apologized for things that have gone on in the past regarding Palestine. And I think that really, if they were seriously concerned about their position on the matter, the first thing they would do is probably hold a meeting with fans. They would certainly be meeting with visiting Palestinians to the club and responding to
Yeah,
emails. And there's just no sign that they're willing to do any of that.
that was shoddy. Amongst the many shoddy things, that was truly shoddy. I mean, maybe we should explain the context of that statement that you made. That there was it the Lakshee Celts that were over? Was it?
Yeah, so they visited Glasgow in I think December of 2024, and they basically the club wouldn't meet with them, and they'd sent three. This was representatives from Ladji Celtic, but also the Ladji Centre. They'd sent three letters to the club. They hadn't received a response, and I just think. Yeah, I mean, there's like a particular irony, I think, as well, of like, a club that was founded by Irish Catholics who don't answer their door, when Palestinians come knocking just before Christmas time. It's kind of, to me, like, I
Mm,
thought that was quite interesting. And
yeah,
given as well, like we mentioned, how the club was founded, it just seems to be a total lack of respect and just people that are really divorced from like the morals of the fans and also like I mentioned before the club mission statement. I mean, if you have directors in place who don't embody any of the values which Celtic Football Club says it stands for, then I just think ultimately they're going to run the club into the ground, and there's going to be that gulf between what they believe in and what the fans believe in is going to just grow wider and wider.
do you know the mission statement? I worked for Celtic, the Celtic magazine, the Celtic View, from the late 80s to the late 90s, 8.5 years. And it was during that time, after Fergus McCann took over, they created the mission statement and they stuck them in the walls of all the pillars and all the lounges and whatever. When it first went up, I was looking at it and it was talking about Celtic's principles. And I thought, oh. So I looked, I had to get a hold of the PR man. I said, see when you're talking about Celtic's principles, the principles doesn't end ALS, so they had to take them all down. they used the wrong principles,
Oh,
as in the skill principle as opposed to principles, Like, so, sorry,
not a
that was
great
just, you
start.
got me set off in that wee reverie, about when I'd hair.
Yeah,
You've
not
taken.
not the best start for them anyway.
No. Maybe that says something that their principles have always been a bit skew with,
I think so, yeah. I think
in
so.
more
That's
ways
you're
than
probably onto
one.
something there.
Yeah. And for you, how did you come to this Scottish sports Palestine? Scottish sport for Palestine, I should say.
Yeah, I think I'd been involved in activism, related to Palestine, going to demonstrations, going back years and years and years. And when I was younger, I used to boycott Israeli products, from quite a young age. I think I probably relapsed at one point. But I remember like
I think we all did. I think we
feeling
all did.
yeah, but I remember really feeling like at a really young age, like to me, like it made so much sense. I don't understand when you look at Israel and Palestine. I couldn't understand why anybody would sympathize with Israel. It just, yeah, even without having the vocabulary to probably like understand it at that age, I just remember thinking like it's a no brainer. And then yeah, I suppose like probably like later in life got more involved in the activism, and then it was maybe a couple of years ago, I think probably 20 late 2023 early 2024, I got involved in the sports side of things, basically just because I saw an organization called Irish Sport for Palestine and what they were doing in
Oh
Ireland,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
wondered if anyone was doing something similar in Scotland. And it's been kind of interesting because I think initially I started it thinking that you could use sport as a kind of channel in which to fundraise, raise awareness, etc. And at the time, Irish Sport for Palestine were doing a lot of work with Irish athletes and politicians and getting them to speak out. And as I got started, I realized how difficult it was to get anybody in sport to say anything, not to
Tell
mention
me about it.
politicians.
As 35 years a sports journalist, tell me about it.
Yeah, and then you sort of quickly realize, well, actually, maybe there's a reason they're not speaking out, and the campaign kind of quickly switched to, rather than being using sport as a way to, promote awareness, it was actually more like trying to expose Scottish sport for Zionism, because the reason these athletes aren't speaking out is because, of their sponsors, because of their club associations. They're athletes who may or may not be pro-Palestinian, but if they are in clubs which are feeder clubs for like Team GB, then they're never ever going to come out and say anything that is anti-Israeli. And yeah, it really makes you think
Yeah,
how sport, I think, has historically, I believe, played actually a big role as well in actually the settling um, of Israelis in Palestinian territory. I think it's been used as a way to channel funds in. And yeah, one of the things that I've done recently is kind of done an investigation into Celtic's role in that. And yeah, it has shown that historically there have been fundraisers in football. I don't think Celtic's the only club. I think there are other clubs as well, but they've used football as a way to fundraise, for Israeli settlements. And this is an issue. And I think it's something which probably a lot of these organizations, like the Jewish National Fund was one of the organizations that we were investigating. They've been doing it for a really long time,
right.
and they've kind of not really been properly investigated on it before, I don't think, in terms of their involvement in sport.
So, and they're funneling kind of money to in illegal settlements, like the kind of, yes.
Yeah, so exactly. So, like, the Jewish National Fund's been described as an agency of ethnic cleansing, before by the Israeli historian Ilan Pappé. And essentially it does a lot of its activities under the guise of, what it calls kind of eco-Zionism. And essentially it's repopulating what it claims are deserted areas
Oh, that's the
with,
old
like,
classic, is it? They're all deserted
yeah,
areas, yeah.
exactly, with like non-indigenous species, and that's both like plant and human species. It provides loans for Israeli settlers to build things, and it also reforests areas with non-indigenous plant species, which causes like environmental devastation, huge wildfires. So they've been removing Palestinians from their lands, and they kick Palestinians off their lands. So they're involved in all sorts of fraudulent dealings. And um, yeah, one of the things we've been looking into really is just what role sport has played in fundraising for the Jewish National Fund. And if you go back, there's quite a lot of evidence that there have been a number of football games that have raised money for this.
I think from the Celtic point of view, I think in your investigations and your reports, was it fundraisers within Celtic Park, if I remember rightly, was there?
Yeah, so there was a fundraiser which took place between Celtic and Real Madrid, and that was in Glasgow. That was in, I believe, 1962. So that was a game. We believe that there was also one going all the way back to, I think it was 1957. And that
Right.
was before a Hapoel Tel Aviv game. It was only reported by one newspaper as being a fundraiser. I think it was reported in the Scotsman, and elsewhere they didn't make mention of it being for a charity.
Wasn't it me,
Uh,
but I would have liked to claim it. I wasn't quite there yet.
well, this is the thing. So attending that were representatives from the Jewish National Fund. Then they had a game in 1962 against Real Madrid. Again, this was explicitly for the Jewish National Fund. It was, on the match program, they write about how it was for the rehabilitation of, I believe they frame it as Jewish people, I can't remember exactly how it's phrased, but yeah, I mean, essentially, it was for ethnic cleansing in Palestine. They were kicking people off of their land, and I know that they tried to host a number of other games as well. Some of them didn't really go through, but yeah, so that happened in the 1960s, and then, as you mentioned, there was another fundraiser. I think it was in 2008 or 2009, and that was in Celtic Park. Um,
And this was for
and
the same
and it was
fund.
also for the Jewish National Fund, exactly. And one of the things we discovered that was really troubling was that at the time, Celtic had a fundraiser. He was working for the Celtic Action Fund, later the Celtic Foundation when it changed into the foundation, and he was called Charles Barnett. And so he was a
Yeah.
Celtic fundraiser for a number of years, a really long time. And during his time, not only did Celtic have a fundraiser for the Jewish National Fund, but he was also duly working as a fundraiser and an audit, which is obviously against, audit objectivity and independence rules, because you can't have somebody who's fundraising and then is also kind of responsible for ensuring like the all the finances are in order. And the main issue really with him was that he was the treasurer of the Jewish National Fund throughout this time. He's been treasurer of the Jewish National Fund in Scotland since 1980, and we
You never
believe,
told me that when because I knew him and I don't know if he married her, but he went out with a girl from the Scotsman. That was in the business
mm,
desk. Can't remember her name now, but I knew Charles quite well because was it KPMG he worked for? Do you
yes,
remember that? Yeah,
I
KPMG,
think I believe he did. Yeah,
because they
yeah,
worked in, I think, some of the kind of administrations, liquidations within football clubs. I think he
okay,
might have been involved in Airdrie, but I don't. It, or Airdrieonians, the original Airdrie, but can't. I think he was. I think he was involved in that. Like
interesting.
personable enough guy, but like I didn't know that. I didn't know that backstory because, like you say, we had one of those teachers. Like if people say, "Who's your inspirational teacher?" We had a modern studies teacher, and he sat us down. He said, "We're going to do the name conflict," and he says, "Where's your sympathies lie?" And is it with Israel? And practically everybody put up their hands. You got to remember this is 1980, 1982. And what about the Palestinians? What do you think of that? Because you knew then PLO, Yasser Arafat, like hijacking planes, Munich, and all that. These things are, they're quite kind of that time. If anybody's young here, they might know that we might have lost them. But but so, and he said, "We're going to study this. I can guarantee you by the end of this, your sympathies will have changed." And all he did
Um,
was he just told the story. When we were doing the studies, it was my pronunciations are terrible. It was the Shabila and Shanti massacre. You know the massacre
oh yeah.
in Lebanon, where
Hmm.
Ariel Sharon was implicated in it. They just let these Christian militia go in and murder 1,200 people. The UN implicated them like nothing. People talk. It's horrendous, and any atrocity is horrendous. If people looked at October, they call it October the 7th, 2023, as if nothing like that had ever happened. But it was only nothing like that had. Here's the caveat: nothing like that had ever happened to the Israeli population.
Yeah,
So then it mattered. This hierarchy of life and the hierarchy of death that we find constantly. But it
exactly.
never left me. It never left me. It never left me with what Mr. Burns taught us. And I mean, he taught us to a standard that was university. Every single one of us in
Mm,
that class get an A band one. It wasn't just
amazing.
A's. We get A band ones because we knew Time magazine articles and it was. He said you
Mm,
need. It was like as a an S4. We called it fourth year, but my boy calls it S4. They've changed the
yeah, yeah.
terminology now, don't they? As a fourth year, doing investigating a topic or interrogating a topic to the standard of university, it wasn't normal, but it was just, and everybody was just because I suppose because somebody's opening your eyes to something that you're not going to get opened going about your daily life. You're not going to get it from your mainstream news feeds or your main newspapers.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he sounds like a brilliant teacher. And I think that's like people shouldn't underestimate the importance of, talking to people about these kinds of things. And now that, we do have, social media, the internet, and even although, it has its negative sides, I think one of the great things is that you can connect with Palestinians and talk with them and learn from them, and there's so many brilliant accounts, and and people, if anyone's listening and they want to educate themselves on that, because I think we're all still educating ourselves on it, then like I'd really recommend that people go ahead and do that. And then also, don't just stop there. Like you can connect that also to loads of other indigenous fights. They're all connected. And yeah, I think we have so many resources now. It does really feel like you'd have to be making excuses for yourself to say like you didn't know anything about it, because
No,
you
you're right
can
there.
find the information if you want to.
You're right there. And for you, what do you hope people take, or you're advocating and educating, like which we try to do in my church job and Justice and Peace, and we are, I think I've maybe mentioned it on another podcast, but we are the only dedicated Scottish organisation that signed up to the Stop Trade with Settlements campaign. So
Amazing,
that's
yeah.
something that's really important. And it's all about, we're just trying to get people to recognise what, as you say, you can be educated, but at this superficial level, people still really don't know the ins and outs of. Like I read somewhere recently that if Mary and Joseph were making the journey to Bethlehem in December there, as opposed to 2000 and odd years ago, they would have had to pass 17 checkpoints.
Yeah, I've read that as well. It's staggering, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, shamefully, have you ever been to Israel? I had a Jewish carol friend. You're talking about relapsing or whatever, or kind of. And we went in '94. I said I'm only going because the Oslo Accords. I'd actually been in Washington when the Oslo Accords were signed. No, for that reason, but I just happened to be there at the same time because my cousin, she lived in Washington then. So I thought, this is it. We're getting the two-state solution. I know plenty of people will tell you there should be one state and everybody
Mm.
treated equally and not an ethno state or whatever. But I just mean in terms of dealing with the realpolitik, like a two-state solution. I thought, we're getting the two-state solution, so I will go. And even then, it was like, you go on a tour bus or whatever, and like just the way you could see there was a caste system, you could see people were getting treated. It was like, come out and taste these olives and all that, and somebody would be shouted at like a kind of you boy. It's a bit like kind of. I wasn't there under the Jim Crow laws were in place or whatever, but it was like the Deep South when you think about how the black population were treated. And it
Yeah.
was like, you're at my beck and call. The bus driver would come down and say, you get them this and get them that. And whoa, it was just a kind of frisson, you know what I mean? It was just like a shiver down your back.
Yeah, and I think, you only have to look at that to think what that does, I think, to two different populations, and the humans that live on kind of both sides of
Yeah.
of that wall. I mean, on the one hand, you have people who are arguably like very used to victimizing themselves and seeing themselves as being, historically, has the right to this land and sees Palestinians as lesser than them. And then you have people on the other side of that who sadly are probably really used to being dehumanized on a daily level. And I think that that's really true. A lot of people look at Gaza, and obviously we've seen like how that's just been completely leveled. But I think a lot of people also forget that in the West Bank, like people are subject to daily
Mm.
humiliation. Not even being able to like plan what you do on a day to day, or yeah, being completely unsafe, knowing that your house could be taken from you any day. It's awful. I mean, right now there's a football uh center called the Ida youth centre
Oh yes.
in the West Bank, and it's been given essentially a demolition order by the IOF, and they're running a brilliant campaign at the moment, and they've got a petition on Avaz. So if anyone's listening, like, I'd really recommend that they go ahead and try and sign that, but basically to try and get, like, the presidents of FIFA and UEFA to intervene and to stop this demolition order. And these are people who work at that club, who use it as as a sports facility, and they have no idea if bulldozers will turn up tomorrow. And I can't even imagine living like
No.
that. Like, that's somebody's life. Like, that's their the center, their social hub, like, where they exercise. And yeah, it's just no way to live at all. And it just
Yeah.
goes completely unchecked in global football. It's like nobody that sits at any sort of governance level seems to say anything against it.
Yeah, I mean, we had Peter Samir on here, who is a Christian Palestinian living in East Jerusalem. He runs the YMCA, but it's got the YMCA title, but it's for males and females. And he was telling us about his two daughters, like, getting stopped and getting their dance shoes removed because his two daughters did, and it was like, I said to him, I don't know how you can get up in the morning. He says, I'm doing it. I do it for them because I want them not to have the life that I've had, like a bit. Even in their church, he said what they say is you've got free association to practice your religion, but the reality is they only allow 25 people in the church. He says, so we can't get the scouts in because he works with, like, they couldn't get them in to do, like, I think it was Easter or something. There was one of the, because, so it's a kind of, it's a false notion that you're really allowing people, because if you don't allow people to get there, how can they practice their religion?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I
There's
don't
all these
know.
they're not even microaggressions. What's a stupid expression? All these aggressions,
Yeah,
like they're just like you're just getting beaten.
yeah. I mean, you hear people that, have gone from Gaza to the West Bank, and, they've said, like, where we live, it's terrible, having to put up with this siege, but I couldn't live in the West Bank because,
Yeah,
you can't move. Like, there's no freedom,
yeah,
and in terms of sport, I think that's really impacts, people who do sports like running. You can't actually run very far at all without having to go through a checkpoint. So,
mm,
and sport has so often been like a channel where people use it, to protest, really. And I think it's sad that I think Palestinians are so restricted in terms of, their sporting rights. And equally, it's interesting that Palestine is one of the only, or sport, sorry, is one of the only, kind of arenas where Palestine is globally recognized.
yes, yeah,
So
yeah.
there
It's a
is,
member of
in
FIFA.
theory,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
How can FIFA, again, these double standards, these hypocrisies? How can FIFA recognise Palestine and then not sanction Israeli
Yeah.
national teams at all? I know that's
Yeah.
been another front that you've taken up, haven't you, with SFA and
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, the SFA, they're not going to say anything. They've made that quite clear in communications to me, and I just think, yeah, it's just ridiculous that
mm,
they'll go to these meetings with the heads of FIFA and UEFA, and they do meet them, fairly regularly. Like, they will meet them now and again, and they'll they can just shake these people's hands. And I mean, they'll
yeah,
they'll be treated so well by their confederations, and meanwhile, you have Israeli settlement clubs that are playing on Palestinian land, and it's not only in violation of international law, but it's in violation of FIFA and UEFA's own statutes. And it's the responsibility of people that work within FIFA and UEFA to ensure that these statutes are followed and are protected. And I think that there just seems to be a complete unwillingness by anyone in football to really challenge the presidents of both FIFA and UEFA.
mm,
I mean, Infantino is really running FIFA like a dictatorship.
Yeah,
and he's
yeah.
he's stripped, he's stripped it of so much of its whatever kind of democracy powers that it ever had.
Which
He's
I don't know it was ever many
No,
because
I
it's
mean
been
it never was, but
no,
yeah,
it's always been the Cosa Nostra of football. You
yeah,
know,
exactly,
that's the way they run it.
yeah.
But and on that front about like whether we're in breach of the very agreements we signed, can you explain to us about the Glen Eagles agreement about how?
Yeah, so the Gleneagles Agreement is an interesting one. So it was something which came about as a result of South African apartheid, and essentially, it's important to note, I think, that it is like a colonial agreement because it is something that was created, out of the Commonwealth. So I know that there is probably some hesitation by some countries to actually follow those rules, especially if they want to leave, well, I say rules, it's non-binding, but if they want to leave the Commonwealth, etc. But
Yes,
essentially, it was created in 1977 to try to, use sport as a tool to stop apartheid. And I think I've got the quote here. I believe. What they said is they set about the urgent duty of governments to combat racial segregation. And the quote from the actual agreement, which was made in Gleneagles in Scotland, was that the governments there said that they would withhold any form or support for, um, and sorry, I'm just reading it. And it said here that they would discourage contact or competitions with sporting organisations, teams, or sportsmen from any country where sport is organised on the basis of race, colour, or ethnic origin. So the fact that it says any country here, and they said that they would take practical steps to ensure that these countries were boycotted, this was in 1977, and obviously the country that they were talking about was South Africa. So the other Commonwealth countries signed this agreement. South Africa obviously didn't because, the agreement was created to kick
yeah. Put the
apartheid out.
squeeze in them. Put the squeeze in them.
Exactly. But I mean, the fact that it says any other country, like we've since had the ICJ come out and say that in its advisory opinion that,
Yeah.
you know, Israel is an apartheid state and it amounts to apartheid, and that states and international organizations, should take steps to basically dismantle it and, dismantle the illegal settlements and to not fund them or assist them in any way. And I think that the problem with this is that if the Gleneagles Agreement now applies, then Scotland and other Commonwealth countries should really be doing something about this. They should be boycotting Israel in sport, and they're not doing so.
Yeah. I mean, there's been no sanctions. That's what that's what makes so many of us just feel so powerless. Like there's been no sanctions whatsoever, and they couldn't wait to throw Russia out. And Russia still don't participate in European competitions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, they banned Russia, within 4 days. And interestingly, like the Scottish FA came out with a statement about that. And it did so, I think, in parallel with, other countries at the time. And it said, like our solidarity is with, our Ukrainian colleagues, etc. And it's insane to think that they won't come out with a single statement um, to show solidarity with Palestinians. And they banned Russia within 4 days, and the first footballing deaths were not actually announced until I think the day after or 2 days after the ban. And the first two footballers who were killed were actually, soldiers. Whereas every single footballer and athlete, and there's been over 800, sports people killed in Palestine, they've all been civilians. So it's unbelievable when you think of like the double
Yeah,
standards and just like the complete devaluing, of black and brown lives, because that's what it comes down to, really.
it does. I mean, it's like Jonathan Glazer, the director.
Yeah.
His phrase I always keep coming back to is selective empathy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And interestingly as well, I think a lot of
He was
people don't know
practically
this, but
blacklisted for saying that in the Oscars, you know, like
well,
he's
exactly.
suffered. He's suffered.
Yeah. Yeah, and back in like 2014, I think a lot of people don't realize this, but Russia actually, kind of took Crimean football clubs and incorporated them into their own footballing leagues.
Oh yeah.
And in response, UEFA removed the clubs, so essentially that was UEFA kind of punishing Russia.
Yes.
And, when Russia later, because I think later in like 2023, it then tried to again take Crimean clubs and incorporate it into its league. I think it's done it with 2 clubs or something since. UEFA responded by extending the ban that it had put in place back in 22. It extended it again, and applied it to all Russian teams. So UEFA have clearly stepped in with the fact that Russia is using, Crimea as a territory in which it can, use football as a tool for expansion, colonial expansion, but it's not doing the same with Israel and Palestine, and it's just complete double standards.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'd love to say it's been great to chat to you, but I'm not going to feel any better about the world once we come off this call, Jill. But
I know. I mean, one thing I would say, like, to end it on a positive, is I do think like the fan actions are really like a positive side to this. And I
yes,
do believe like one of the reasons that I wanted to, do work on Celtic is because I do feel that as a club, the fans have quite a unique position in that all fans have power, I think, over their football clubs. But I think with Celtic, it's particularly true because Celtic has this image, of being
the
of
supporters got a
supporters being
soul.
quite
They've got a
exactly,
soul,
yeah,
a
exactly,
political
and I
soul, sometimes a bit a dark soul, But we've definitely got a soul, and I don't think you can, you can't extract someone's soul, can you?
no, I mean, I'm a big believer. I think if fans mobilized, and I think if they really tried to force the board to address this issue and because the board, I think they owe Palestinians, I think, an apology. I think the club in general does. I think for, historical complicity and aligning with Israel in the past. And I think that should absolutely come out. But aside from that, I also think they should apologize to their own fans.
Mm.
And I mean, this is something
Good
that
luck
after
for that.
we, well, I mean, after we wrote our reports, like we asked for accountability. That was one of the main things that we asked for. We asked for them to, yeah, pay reparations to Palestinians, but also to take accountability and responsibility, for their role historically, the club's role, and more recently, including current members of the board, in fundraising for organizations connected to ethnic cleansing. And in response to that, within days, within quite a short time, the Celtic Football Club, well, it asked to meet with fans, but then it also donated, the foundation, I believe, donated £200,000 to charity, half of which went to Gaza. But to me, that's just tokenistic when it doesn't come with a statement, and it's
Yeah,
particularly tokenistic if it's then completely wiped out by a transfer deal to an Israeli club,
yeah.
which, I mean, hopefully doesn't go through. But, it's worth mentioning if you're going to give money, which at the end of the day is probably quite small change for a club like Celtic, to a Palestinian cause, I think it should come with a statement and some sort of,
It would normally come with
apology.
like pictures and like backslapping and all that. It's almost like they're embarrassed.
I think it was, yeah. I mean, I just got the impression that that was money, just hush hush money, and it's not going to stop people from, campaigning for this issue. So they have the opportunity, if they want to meet with fans, if they want to, more than anything, meet with Palestinians on this issue. That should be their number one thing that they do. And it just seems like they have no willingness
Yeah.
to change their minds on this matter, which is really disappointing. But as I say, fan actions have been brilliant. And I
Yes.
think that they will continue to put pressure on that board,
And the
which is
show,
already feeling it.
yeah, and the show at Israel, the red card. I mean, that started amongst the North Curva, I believe, and then it spread. There's almost 100 and odd other clubs that have actually like picked up this campaign. So that shows, as you say, like the grassroots can.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I approached the Green Brigade about launching that campaign, and the idea really was to get that into clubs worldwide because one of the main issues was that it seems very normal now to see Palestinian flags, worldwide and people, showing solidarity with Palestine. And
Al incredible tifos and such like.
yeah, but really, pre 2025 it was still a big taboo, and I think that people were really worried about fines, etc. And I think one thing that campaign has really done is it's really normalized Palestinian support within
Yeah,
stadiums,
yeah,
and I don't doubt that it has put pressure on the powers that be in football, because it's an embarrassment for them that this is going on and they've not said or done anything on this issue.
yeah. I mean, I have my issues with the Green Brigade. I'm not really a great fan of ultras in terms of the kind of militaristic element and the some of the behavioural elements, but I can't take it away from them. I doff my cap to them, in terms of being that political soul, like in terms of their solidarity with the Palestinians, and that will never be forgotten. And the very fact, as I say, if you go into their area and you go like behind the scenes in that little corner of the ground, their mural is "Refugees Welcome." They're on the side of right when it comes to politically. It's actually the football I might have more problems with than I like into it. Such is
Yeah,
life.
you're probably, you might not be alone there, but yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I'm sure, the as I mentioned before, like I'm sure the board absolutely knows that for all the problems that they have with some of their fans, they will also know that these fans do a brilliant PR job for the club, even if it's out with Scotland, because I'm sure they do, there's a lot of Celtic, there's a lot of Irish diaspora that live overseas, and a
Yes.
lot of them will be Celtic supporters. And I think that really, when we take the issue of Palestine, I think it should be one which I think also, transcends like one corner of the stadium. I think it should be something that a lot
Oh
of
yeah, and it
Celtic
was, and
supporters, and it,
in
and it has
fairness,
been.
it was. And
Yeah.
if they had another flag display at the next European game, they would get the same buy-in right
Yeah,
across the stadium.
absolutely.
That was the great thing that I was writing for the Scotsman back then. I said, not don't let anybody say this is a minority or whatever. This was
No.
right around the stadium.
No, and I think, like, many Celtic fans would hold that position. It's not something which is just isolated to one part of the stadium. There might be a concentration of flags there, but there's no reason that, people would take, a completely morally different standpoint in a different
No,
section of that stadium. And equally, it's something that I think is also, you see it in other clubs. I mean, we had Rangers fans who came out in July, I think it was 2025, who were also calling on their club to stop the signing of Dor Turgeman. And so it's not something which is just affecting Celtic Football Club. And it's really
yeah,
great, I think, to see fans from other clubs also get involved in this, because I think these calls as well, they have like wider impacts. I mean, after that call went out from Rangers fans, I had people message me, from the MLS, who were concerned about him maybe coming to their club.
all right,
Afterwards,
right,
he did end up at an MLS club. And even if it's not enough to stop the transfer at this stage, you never know in the future when it might be. Because, like, once you put that information out onto the internet about maybe like what this player has done,
yeah,
are they a reservist soldier right now, etc. Um, it's a worry for people. They don't want that associated with their club, and the boards of these clubs can't want it either. I think they rely on people not knowing the information. So once the information's out there, I think it's a powerful tool for fans to really use that against their club and to say against their boards and to say, look, don't sign this player or don't pay into this Israeli club. Like there are other options available. And hopefully boards will start to listen
Aye.
to fans.
Then maybe this is, we don't know, taking us right, going full circle, taking us right back to Tabby. Like, we don't know, but maybe this is what happened there. It was the fans' revolt. They had a
Yeah.
banner. They had a banner where the directors parked their cars, like the car park where the directors parked their cars on Saturday. So who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, it would be hard to say. I mean, who does know? I mean, you'd like to think that it's one thing that they wouldn't want to add to like all of their, their troubles at the moment.
Aye,
But
you'd like to.
I don't
You'd
know how
like
their
to
minds
think.
work.
Yeah, no, that's where you can, that's where you've got 60,000 Celtic supporters agreeing with you and don't know how their minds work.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's a stain on the club at the end of the day, and
Oh yeah,
yeah, you don't want that associated with their club with your club, and I think it's great that Celtic fans have rallied against this, and I think it would be really nice to see this take it would be nice to see, I think, Celtic fans like take this issue, and the issue of the board's stance on Palestine, even just in general, in terms of their anti-racist policies, and use it also to like push the board because this is a board which, for far too long, has seemingly had a neutral position on the issue, but actually,
yeah.
when you look into it, as we have there seems to have been a lot of other things going on,
That
behind closed
neutrality
doors.
collapses.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it'd be nice to see this take a central part in the campaign to get the board out because I think, one of the things that when David Miller and I were writing our report into Celtic, we looked at the actual takeover of the club in 1994. And this was when the JNF treasurer Charles Barnett came into the club,
oh, that's
as
right. That's
he
I
was
was at the club
interim
then. Yeah,
financial director. It Celtic had Zionists involved at the club before that, and it had Zionists after the takeover. And so, just because a board goes doesn't mean that the Zionist links go. And I think this is like a really important moment for the club.
yeah,
And I feel like it would be brilliant if Zionism or complicity in Zionism was one of the reasons that a board member walked. Um, and if not the main reason, if they felt the pressure from fans about their stance on it, because there are not many clubs, if any, right now where there are directors feeling that pressure about this specific issue.
well, I mean,
And it would be,
yeah. I mean, do you ever wonder, like, because I can't get my head around it. The Brighton supporter who was given the 5-year ban for wearing a. I mean,
yeah.
what did the other what did the rest of the Brighton fan base feel about that? It's just
Yeah, I mean,
extraordinary.
there's a Seagulls Against Apartheid uh, group on well I don't know if it's a group or if it's just an account but online and they post about it. I mean I think Brighton's had obviously the Bloom family
Yeah,
uh, as owners for decades and Tony Bloom he has the Bloom Foundation which funnels money into Israel and I've looked into their policies. They are Zionist. He's injected I think 2.4 million pounds into Israel in the last 4 or 5 years, and the biggest donation was 2024, and the 2025 figures aren't out yet, so it might even just keep going up.
right,
So I think it's fair to say that he is a Zionist. And interestingly, after we did our report on Celtic, I went to Finland to present the results at a sports conference there.
right.
And,
Neat.
there were a lot of different journalists there. There were also NGOs like there was Fair Square who do a lot of work on football, also Amnesty International. And the only kickback that my panel received, and we were all talking about different issues, but a couple of us speaking about Palestine, was from one individual. And that person introduced themselves as a Jewish writer, and they asked why the organizers had allowed this panel basically to take place on what was the anniversary of of October the 7th. Now, I hadn't even realized it was October the 7th, that day when we were doing it. And, people said, well, it shouldn't really matter that it's happening on this day. And anyway, it was only when I looked into it that I saw that that person who essentially kind of heckled us was actually a BBC journalist, and interestingly sits on the fan advisory board of Brighton and Albion Hove Football
Right.
Club, which does not surprise me that they would potentially send somebody to a talk that was on Zionist infiltration at football clubs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but she didn't want us to know that. That's not how she introduced herself. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there's support for fans who stand up for Palestine at Brighton, but sadly, there seems to be also a lot of maybe Zionism in the club where these people are also punished for it.
Yeah. No, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. I mean, it was just he was just wearing a Palestinian strip, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so yeah, terrible, and banned for, I think was it 5 years? Did you
5
say, or
years.
that was the latest? Yeah, and he was a season ticket for like a holder for a really long time.
He was. He was.
Yeah,
I cannot compute that. I just cannot compute that. But there's so much in this world I cannot compute, and thank goodness we've got people like yourself, Jill.
yeah. Well, right back at you as well, and yeah, I mean, and also to the Celtic fans, who've like championed this for a lot longer than I have, and who probably going back years and years and years have been, advocates for all kinds of social justice causes, and this may be one of them. And yeah, I would say to them, don't get disheartened, because I think a lot of people see what Celtic fans are doing and they see it as like quite a beacon of hope in football, which otherwise can be like quite a doom and gloom, you know,
I know.
sector
Yeah.
to yeah, especially when you're looking at these kinds of issues. But yeah, what they're doing is brilliant. So if anyone's going to feel that pressure, it's going to be the Celtic board, because a lot of that is now being directed at them. So keep it up.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, look, I think like you can guarantee, and that's what I guaranteed to Peter Samir, because he said it means so much to us to see like Celtic fans flying Palestinian flags and just their
Yeah,
understanding support. And I said, you'll never lose that. You'll never lose
yeah,
that.
definitely. Yeah, no, good on them.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Jill. It's been an absolute pleasure and education to have you on, and it's been it's terrific to really kind of investigate this subject. Really delve.
Yeah. Oh, well,
It's just,
thank you very much for
I
having
can't
me.
believe how quickly it's passed. It's been like that. It's been
I
like that.
know. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah,
No,
it's been
and but
brilliant.
keep on going, and like I'd advise, I'd encourage anybody to follow you on X. God, I still feel bad that we're all on X, but
I know.
like so it's Scottish Sport for Palestine people, and it's a great account. It's a great
Oh,
account.
thank you very much. I appreciate the support.
Thanks, Jill.
Thank you.
Bring me sunshine in your smile.
We hope you enjoyed that podcast. There will be more along soon. Please share the joy of Celtic Underground. Rate us wherever you can find us on your podcast provision, and also subscribe to the celticunderground.substack.com. As you'll be aware, there are two types of subscription. There's free subscription, where you get a certain amount of content delivered directly to your email address, and then there's a paid for subscription, where you get even more content delivered directly to your email address as and when it comes out. Anyway, enough of me. We hope you enjoyed the podcast, and this is me, Harry Brady, saying good night and God bless. Good night.
Bring me sunshine in your smile. Bring me laughter all the while. In this world where we live, there should be more happiness. So much joy you can give to each brand new bright tomorrow. Make me happy through the years. Never bring me any tears. Let your arms be as warm as the sun from up above. Bring me fun, bring me sunshine, bring me love, sweet love. Bring me fun, bring me sunshine, bring me love.